Wow. Good morning. As you've just heard from the voice of God, my name is Art McQueen. With full apologies to some of you in the room, I'm going to provide you with a brief bio of myself. And in order to make it brief, I am going to speak Rotarian. I'm currently the Z34RC. Prior to this position, I was an ARC. I'm also a PDG, which of course means I was a DG, DGE, DGN, DGND, a PAG, and an AG, as well as a PP, a P, a PE, a PN, a VP, and an SAA. I've been a DRFC and an RLIDL. Been a trainer for both PETs and GETs. We're the only organization I'm aware of that takes acronyms and turns them into words. My wife Gingy and I are MDs, BSMs, have multiple PHFSs, and I'm a member of the PHS and was honored with a CMS. You are, I know, and that's scary. That PDG thing actually means practicing doing good. All that said, first and foremost, like all of, I apologize, not all of you, but soon to be all of you, I am a Rotarian. A member of the Rotary Club of Flagler Beach, a breakfast club that actually meets at 8-ish. And yes, as a proud member, with all those acronyms and perhaps a wee bit of OCD, that 8-ish thing drives me nuts. But it works for our club. Many thanks to Alec and Ryan and Karen for inviting me to moderate this session. I am humbled to share this stage with these three individuals. And you'll understand exactly what I mean when you get an opportunity to hear them. I don't think it would start an argument in this room by stating innovation comes amazingly fast and furious in our world currently. It's a change in speed that we have trouble comprehending. The iPhone, something we take for granted, came out in 2007. Since then, they've sold over 1 billion iPhones. We look forward not only to the next release, the new features, but it also has no shortage of competitors. With rare exception, myself being one of them, I am one step removed from a flip phone. We drive our cars with what's generally a female voice in our ear. And for the men in our audience, like our wives or partners, that female voice from the GPS is next to never wrong. Some of us still manage to get lost because occasionally we as men still refuse to listen. That same GPS technology assists us in ways too numerous to express. For us as Rotarians, it can be something as simple as the delivery of vaccines to areas that are specifically needed and assists us in getting boots on the ground to take care that an outbreak of something does not occur, that it becomes that single case that we take care of before it spreads. That's just a single example of how technology is working for us. This session will focus on social responsibility, leadership development, and community involvement. And occasionally, how innovation and technology are assisting us in accomplishing our goals. These people, although not Rotarians as of yet, are people of action. They are truly making a difference. Each of our presenters will be sharing about 20 minutes of their story. Once all of them have presented, you'll notice that we've got microphones set up, and at the end of their presentation, we'll be fielding your questions. It's set up to end at noon, but there's nothing hard and fast right behind us, so if there's more questions than we have time for, we will attempt to take those questions. I'll not be reading the biographies of our speakers. I don't want to take time away from them, and they are in your programs. But I will share a few things with you. I'll not share the acronyms that follow their names. They're numerous, like mine, but they're in fields of a different language. And I would not understand all those acronyms. How many of you, I will share a couple of interesting things about them. How many of you swim for exercise? Show of hands. Now keep those hands up if you swim a mile a week, 3 times a week. Oh, got one. One of our presenters swims a mile 3 times a week. One of our presenters works with an organization whose innovations we've seen in a number of movies like Iron Man 3, as well as some of your favorite television shows. And lastly, one of our presenters has a cousin who participated as an exchange student here in the great state of Georgia with one of your Rotary clubs. Our first presenter is Dr. Pinar Keskinocak. How do I do? Pinar is a professor at Georgia Tech. Her extensive research has focused on infectious disease, and this has led her to working with not only the American Red Cross, CARE, and many others, but also with one of our partners in the Countdown to Zero, the CDC. Pinar shared with me that her family moved from the Balkans to Turkey, where she was raised. Please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to Pinar.
Thank you very much for the very nice introduction. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be here sharing the stage with Aimee, Stewart, and Art, and to be with you on this beautiful Saturday morning. Thank you for having me. So we are going to talk about math and engineering this morning. And I can already see some of you jumping up and down in joy when you hear these 2 words. But before we begin, I would like to ask you to sit back, relax, close your eyes, think about these 2 words, and pay attention to the images, thoughts, and feelings that pop up in your head. Just go ahead, close your eyes. Don't fall asleep, though. Okay, come back. So now keep thinking about what popped up in your head, and maybe some of you started a little bit simple with something like this. Or some of you may have gone more complicated. Or maybe something like this. Some of you may love to tinker with things in your free time, or more complex. Or maybe some of you went back to the origins of the word engineer and thought about something like this. How many of you thought about your math classes and how much you loved your math classes? Okay, great. I see a couple of hands going up. So I'm guessing not many of you thought about making the world a better place when you thought about the words math and engineering. So I'm hoping that by the end of this morning's session, more of you will think about preventing or curing disease, or helping people, better preparing for disasters, or in general making the world a better place when you hear those 2 words. So the talk is not about implicit associations, but we each associate words with certain concepts and feelings, and hopefully a couple of the examples I shared this morning is going to change the images that pop up in your head next time you hear these words. So I'll share with you 3 examples this morning. And the common theme about these examples is that they're all in healthcare, even though there are many different applications. They all started as class projects with our students, and that ended up going into a direction far beyond being a class project. And there are, of course, many disciplines of engineering, but I pulled these 3 examples from my own work with my students and partners in industrial and systems engineering, which is a discipline using math models very heavily and focuses on utilizing these mathematical models in addressing complex questions, especially when there are multiple competing objectives, when there are limited resources, and when there is data, so that utilizing these models, we try to help the decision makers make better and more informed decisions. Okay, our first example is about childhood vaccination. As many of you know, there's a recommended vaccination schedule published every year in the US and in other countries as well. And if all the children followed this vaccination schedule in a timely manner, we would just skip to my next example, but it turns out that they do not. Even in the United States, even among the communities that have access to healthcare, the vaccination rates, timeliness of the vaccinations vary quite a bit. So about half of our children fall behind their vaccines by the age of 2. And when this happens, a healthcare provider needs to create a personalized catch-up schedule for this child, considering the child's age and vaccination history. This is not an easy task because there are a ton of rules about how this catch-up schedule need to be considered, need to be constructed, again, given the information about this particular child's case. So this table summarizes some of the rules, but there are more in that red book, which is the key publication related to vaccinations. So you can imagine a clinician, a healthcare provider, in a setting where they have this child in their office and they quickly need to create the schedule. And oftentimes, the schedules that they create end up being inaccurate, and they do not provide the protection that the vaccine is intended to do. So to address this problem, we joined forces with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and Georgia Tech Research Institute, and we developed a very easy-to-use online tool that automates the process. So the tool takes as input the child's birth date, vaccination history. You click a button, and within less than a second, you get a personalized schedule for that child. So the schedule looks something like this, where it shows the history. It shows in red the catch-up doses, basically telling you you are behind with these, but you still can do it. And then after a while, you go back to the regular schedule as shown in the yellow. So if you have children in your family, in your extended family, please check this out and share with your family and friends. It's available freely online. It's been used by many, many parents and physicians, over 1 million users since we put this online together with the CDC, and also received quite a bit of press coverage. And we are very excited to make this tool available to improve the timely vaccinations in the United States. Okay, so this example focused on prevention. Our next example, still we are at the individual level, but it focuses on treatment. So this example comes from the world of organ transplant. Some of you may know that if we look at the demand and supply between the organs available for transplant and the patients who are waiting for a transplant in the waiting list, this gap has been growing. The number of organs available has remained more or less flat over the past decade, but the number of patients waiting for a transplant has gone up. So we see an increasing gap between demand and supply. So this means that there are many patients who unfortunately die while they are on the wait list, waiting for an organ transplant. But at the same time, we also have a lot of organs being discarded. So they have a limited amount of time during which they can be transplanted, and if none of the patients that the organ is offered to accepts the transplant, then the organ actually goes to waste. And this happens more than we might think. Part of the reason for this is the physicians and the patients, when they are offered an organ, might think, well, maybe this is not high quality enough. If we wait, we might get a better organ in the future, which might be better quality, and it might actually increase the chances of success and post-transplant survival. So that's part of the reason why some of these organs are declined. So when a patient and a physician, this is a joint decision between the physician and the patient, when they're offered an organ, they basically have to think about a couple of different options. So they may decide to decline and stay on the wait list. In that case, they need to think about the chances of survival, say looking down 5 years down the road, if they remain on the wait list. But there is a chance they may be offered another organ, so how long that's going to take is unknown, and there are not very good tools to estimate that. That's one of the things that we are working on. If and when that happens, you might undergo transplant at a future date, and then in that case, you need to estimate your chances of survival if you undergo transplant at a future date, keeping in mind that your health condition is probably going to deteriorate during this wait time. So the second option is to say yes to the organ and undergo transplant today. So in that case, you need to have some estimate as to, given your health condition, your characteristics, and the donor's characteristics, the organ's characteristics, what are the chances that you will be surviving, say, looking 5 years down the road? It is pretty complicated. And there is a lot of data out there from previous organ transplants. There is your information about the donor. And you, whether you are a physician or a patient, you need to make this decision in a very short amount of time. And it's very difficult for us, for anybody to make such a decision just by thinking or gut feeling or even experience. The decision becomes even more complicated if the organ falls into the category of what we call increased risk. So this is a term by the CDC. These are the organs that are, the donor is tested, they test negative for certain diseases, but given the donor's lifestyle and certain behaviors, there's still a small chance, however small it might be, that the donor and the organ might be carrying some infection, even though it is not showing up in the tests that we have. So the question or the decision becomes even more complicated if that's the case. So we, again, joined forces with the CDC on this particular project, and we are in the process of developing a decision support tool to help physicians and patients make this decision in a more informed way. The tool takes as input characteristics of the patient, characteristics of the donor, and then some indication as to whether or not this organ falls into this increased risk category. And in the back, it uses data, thousands of data points from the transplants that were performed over the past 20 years, and utilizes some machine learning techniques to come up with predictions in terms of the survival curves for the different options that we discussed before. So now, as a physician or as a patient, you have in front of you some information, numbers that help you understand the outcomes depending on which of these decisions that you take. So you have a better way of evaluating these decisions. So this is still in the prototype phase. We are currently piloting it. So if any of you in the audience work in this domain, I would be very happy to chat with you after the session. Okay, so the two examples we discussed so far were at the individual level. One focused on prevention, the other focused on treatment. Our third example is going to take us up to the public health level, and we are going to move to Africa, to Mozambique in particular. So this is a country where healthcare resources are very limited. There are about 3 physicians per 100,000 people. Does anybody know what this ratio is in the US? Anyone in the audience? Okay, so it's about 100 times worse than what we have in the United States. So that's how tightly constrained the healthcare resources are. So in this country, when healthcare workers graduate from school, if they want to work in a government position, they are assigned to different locations across the country. And these assignments have been traditionally made manually by a group. And in making these assignments, they would take into account the qualifications of the healthcare workers, as well as the demand in different locations. And they would try to create a good match, again, between demand and supply. However, they did not really consider the preferences of the workers for location. So we are talking about people, not widgets, that we are sending to different areas. And people have preferences about where they want to work. Given the lack of consideration for these preferences, several healthcare workers either did not show up to work, they chose to work for the private sector or a different organization. Some of them requested relocation frequently, and this caused a lot of disruption in this already constrained system. So once again, we joined forces with the CDC and the Task Force for Global Health, which is a wonderful organization based in Atlanta, doing a lot of work in Africa, and also the Mozambique Ministry of Health. And we developed a decision support tool to help them make these assignments, considering both demand and supply and the workers' preferences. So in the back of this tool is a model that we call mixed integer programming that runs and sifts through thousands and millions of different possibilities in a very smart way, not completely enumerating all of them, and comes up with solutions that actually nicely balance these different trade-offs. So I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this project, just to give you an idea about how we integrate these hands-on projects into the education of our students at Georgia Tech. So this particular project, like the other two that I discussed, started as a class project. We had 2 students who worked on this project. They did the preliminary data collection, understanding the context, and the model development, the initial model development. And as I mentioned, the project was in collaboration with the Task Force for Global Health, our partner there, and the CDC and the Mozambique Ministry of Health. So after graduation, the student, in part inspired by her experience in this course, decided to do a master's degree, continue to graduate school. During that time, she received a Fulbright scholarship, worked in Nigeria for a while, and she's currently working for the World Food Program. Moving on, another student took on the project. This was a PhD student in our program. She further developed the models and the decision support tool. And the tool basically got implemented in Mozambique for the past 2 years. So now we come to the last student on the slide, who also was in the same class with the first 2 students, but she was working on a different project. So she heard about this project, but she wasn't on it. After graduation, she joined Task Force full-time. So she's currently one of the people leading this project in Mozambique, and they're also piloting it in Tanzania. And the results that we heard from the Mozambique Ministry of Health has been very positive. They saw a significant increase in satisfaction in terms of the workers' assignments and a decrease in the number of requests that they receive for relocation. So I want to share this example with you just to give you a sense of how these hands-on activities and projects are incorporated into our curriculum and how we work with our alumni and partners in the education of our students and also make a positive impact on the world. So both of these students on the right side have been supported by a fellowship that was thanks to the endowment of one of our alums. So we are grateful for that as well. So as I mentioned, the education takes place at different levels. We have our undergraduate program, capstone design courses. Some of you may have actually worked with some of the Georgia Tech students on these courses. We have our graduate programs. We have professional education certificate programs for people who are in the workforce, either in the health sector or the humanitarian sector, and who want to come back and learn more about the systematic approaches. And we also develop a lot of educational materials, such as case studies, classroom games, and that we share with them with other universities as well as organizations around the world. So the examples I talked about were from a small area of application of industrial engineering. There are many more. And of course, there are many other disciplines of engineering at Georgia Tech. So I could talk all day telling you different stories and so on. But I just picked a small sample of examples here. So we have one student group who worked on developing some new technology for surgical blades to make them safer and more effective. Another student worked on developing something that's environmentally friendly for weed control. I was very excited to hear that one, as I always struggle with the weeds in my yard. Another student group has developed an outreach program, particularly reaching out to women and underrepresented minorities to encourage them to participate in STEM fields. And then finally, here's a group that developed a virtual reality technology to be used in advanced biology courses where students can actually look into the inner workings of the cells and organisms and so on. And this, I was chatting with Stewart, this is, I know, an area of interest and success for him, so maybe they'll get in touch with Stewart. So these are just a small, very small sample of examples of how our students are engaging in innovation, in leadership, in outreach and service, which I know are all areas of interest to the Rotary Club as well. All right, so now we are going to go back to where we started. Now you all close your eyes again. You think about the words math and engineering. And I hope this time you think about happier, healthier people in a better world. Thank you.
Thank you, Pinar. Our next presenter is Stewart Rodeheaver, Brigadier General retired. During Stewart's distinguished military career, he was awarded the Legion of Merit Medal 5 times, the Bronze Star with V device, the Meritorious Medal 5 times, and the Army Commendation Medal 7 times. But his career following 38 years of service is why he joins us today. Please join me in both thanking Stewart for those 38 years, but in welcoming him to this stage as well. Stewart Rodeheaver.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, I very much appreciate you letting me be here today. I love working with Rotarians for a couple of reasons. One is, you know how to serve and get things done. But secondly, is there anybody here from Tucker, the Tucker Rotary Club? My daughter is Lauren Allen, who's in your club, and my granddaughter is Emma, who comes to your club every Thursday. And she has told me she's an honorary Rotarian, and when she comes to see me, she brings me that milk carton and says, "Papa, we got to fill this up." And I fill it up every time I see her, so appreciate the service, really do. I did serve in the Army for 38 years, so I always like to ask. I came up through 3rd Armor, 3rd Infantry Division, 18th Airborne Corps, and finally 1st Army. So is there anybody here that served with me? Would you raise your hand, please? Okay, I don't see any hands. It's always good to know who's in the audience because nothing messes up a good war story like an eyewitness. And so I want to make sure you know who's here, who I'm talking to. So I had a lot of different places I served, a lot of different things I did. In 2004, 5, and 6, I commanded all U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq. I commanded some of the forces in Afghanistan, and I commanded North Africa. And I had groups from all over that were coming to me to work with us. And I'm a good South Georgia boy. I got a little bit of an accent. We had people there from all over the United States. Of course, the Army units were from all over the United States. We had National Guard units there from Puerto Rico, who we had a little bit of trouble understanding. We had National Guard units there from Louisiana, who nobody understood. And we had groups from other countries. And we had a group from Britain that was a bomb disposal unit, but it was led by a command sergeant major. Now, in America, you salute, you put your heels together, you salute, say, "Yes, sir," and you go do your job. In Britain, they stomp their feet, and they salute backwards, and then they yell. So we had our first meeting in Iraq, and I brought all the leaders together, and I started telling them, I said, "This is what we're going to do. Are there any questions?" They all said, "No, sir," and they filed out, except for that sergeant major. And he came up, stomped his feet, saluted, and said, "Sir, I think we're going to have trouble working with you." And I said, what's the problem, Sergeant Major? He said, you talk funny and I can't understand you. My little redneck hair stood up, and I said, Sergeant Major, you talk funny and I can't understand you. He bristled up. He said, sir, I'll have you know, we speak the Queen's English in my outfit. I said, which Queen? He said, Queen Elizabeth. I said, well, we speak the King's English in my outfit. He said, which king? I said, Elvis Presley. Uh-huh. True story. True story. After that, he said, okay, I got you, boss. We're all on the same sheet. We had no trouble working together, and we became good, lifelong friends. But during those rotations, we had so many people coming to us, and we're trying to give them a new piece of technology every third day. And this is not like a new laptop. I mean, one day you come, you're assigned to me, and we hand you a new shoulder-fired rocket missile. 3 days later, I get a new shoulder-fired rocket missile. So I say, put that one down, take this one up, and let's get ready to go fight with it. And it just keeps going like that. And the ones of you, I see the ones of you who've been in the military laughing, but that's exactly the way it happened. So we had all this equipment flowing to these soldiers who could not understand it fast enough to put it into battle. So we started having people getting hurt with equipment, not being able to use it. So I wrote a letter to the Joint Chiefs, and I said, hey, you need to train these guys better before you send them to me. They said, you're a general, you figure it out. And as they would do. So we started trying to figure it out. And that is what started our work into technology, augmented reality, mixed reality, and some of the things I'm going to show you today. I retired in 2010, was going to fish, moved back to Middle Georgia, lived on Lake Sinclair. I was going to fish, but in 30 days I had all the fish I can stand, and I was bored. And the Army called and said, we really like what you were doing for us, but we don't want to do it. Will you do it for us inside the Army? So we started developing programs for the Army in the virtual reality, mixed reality fields. And we greatly increased the effectiveness, lost casualty rate, all those things were really, really good in growing programs inside the military. So about 7 years ago, we stepped out. We got so many requests from soldiers, wives or husbands who were teachers. And they said, hey, you took a tank apart in a classroom today in 3D. I'm a biology teacher. What can you do for me? So several years ago, we hired a bunch of firms, a bunch of teachers, and we started building programs for schools. And what I'm going to show you today is how the education world is changing and how Rotarians affect that, because I know that's one of your big programs that you work on as far as the things that you back. So I know some of you still have flip phones or close to flip phones, and those of you who do need to step up into the technology world. I can't do much for you to help you. Excuse me a minute. But how many teachers, school teachers, former school teachers I got out here? Okay, you'll understand something. We're trying to teach young children phonetics, how to do their words, how to do their letters, and how to recognize things. So we have come up with a program that we developed. Let's see if this is still. Is it up on the stage yet? Let's see. Yep. Okay. So we can take a normal piece of paper. This is a piece of paper with a picture of a lion on it that you may or may not be able to see yet. And we taught the computer, when I look at this piece of paper with my computer, it will go find all the parts and build that image for me. So if I look at that lion with my tablet, it will go build that lion for me. Now, one of the things that we've also done is, because we're trying to innovate, is we've made it interactive. So if I touch him, he'll roar at me. Now, when you're trying to teach children phonetics and things like this, if you teach them like this and they can look at a book and an elephant will stand up, walk around a page and trumpet, they understand exactly what an elephant is. The next time you say elephant, you don't have to explain it to them again. So they grab onto it. So we do a lot of work in that way. We do a lot of work in the medical field. So if I look at this heart, it'll go out and find all the parts for the heart. And when I pick that up, I'm going to show you it's a 360-degree heart. I can turn it all the way around. We can see the front, the back, or whatever. But now we can also dissect it on the screen. And when I do, you can go down inside and see the tricuspid valves down inside the heart. And this is all off of a piece of paper. If you take this piece of paper and you Xerox it, if you copy it black and white, you give it to 1,000 of your friends, you can do the exact same thing I'm doing now. And I have packets for you if you want one of these packets before you leave. You'll be the coolest mom or grandmom around because you can put this down to your phone and it's free. You just download the app and then you can look at the pictures and you'll be able to do all this. And we have hundreds and hundreds of other pictures that we've done in here like this. I'll see if I can show you. This one was always fun. We've got a picture of a skull. On this one, we made little pictures and we give them to the students and say, okay, teacher, take that picture of the skull and put it on your forehead. And then they would look at this and we'd say, okay, kids, all right, let's take your teacher's head apart. So we started dragging and dropping, taking apart the teacher's head. The kids get real interested. And, I've never had them yet ask me how to put the teacher's head back together. So we put a button there that says reset so we can do that. But I want to show you, these are examples, and again, there's many more examples in here. There's a car engine, there's a rocket engine in here. There's if any of you are chemistry, there's a full periodic table in here that's fully functional. When you look at it, it'll pop up out of your phone. You can pick the elements, you can move them around, you can actually move the protons, neutrons around. A lot of things like that you can do with these. But this is a program that we do and give to schools because this gets them into that next field, the field of technology. Let me show you some of the things that we're doing with this. I'm gonna walk away from this just a minute. I want to show you my buddy over here that I brought with me. Can you see the man over here, or the body of the man over here on this? This is actually a mouse pad that we made. It's just a rubber mouse pad, but it's a fully functional cadaver. So we can take that same tablet or a pair of glasses that does the same thing, and now we can lay that tablet, that body out on a table. You can look at that body. The body will come up out of the table. You can take the skin off, the muscles off, the bones apart. You can operate on the heart. You can look at every nerve cell. You can operate down to cellular level on ocular. I mean, you can do anything you want to for a cadaver on a rubber mat now instead of having to have cadavers, refrigeration, chemicals, all those kind of things. So in the University of Kentucky Medical School, we just replaced all their cadavers with virtual people. In the University of Illinois Medical School, we're in the process of doing the same thing for them, and we're working with several others, including Mercer Medical here in Georgia, and many, many others. So a lot of things are coming about with being able to use this kind of a program. But it's growing in schools so quickly that we are running hard as we can just to keep up because it is going to change the way schools work. Think about if you had a science textbook that you could flip through the book, and when the teacher said, okay, look at the picture on page 5 with your phone, you could look at it, and instead of having to wonder what that cell looks like on because you're seeing a 2D picture, it pops up in that 3D picture, and you can see it, and you can manipulate it, you can take it apart, how much faster you'll absorb material. Now, the other thing that we've done that I want to make sure you realize is you saw that line pop up over there without having to wear any special glasses whatsoever. You didn't have to wear big old 3D glasses. We've done away with those. You didn't have to wear anything special. Everything's done between the phone and the piece of paper, and we can make things better and better and better. So expect textbooks to go away, to be replaced with visual books. Expect teachers to become coaches. Expect a lot of those things to change as we go through this. One of the things I'll also show you, I'm going to see if I can do this from here. Let's see if I can get me. All right, now, that's off my business card. So people don't throw away my business card. But I'm going to show you something just as a secret here. I want you to see it's a real good weight reduction program because I only filmed the front half of me. But here's the trick. We figured out how to do that by mistake. But now that we can do that, I can take you, scan you, I can take that image and send it anywhere in the world you want to and project it life size, and you can give your speech tomorrow. I could give this speech today right here from my office in Edenton without having to be here. We can do that right now. It's a growing trend. It's a growing thing that's happening. How many of you have children that play Little League sports or grandchildren that play Little League sports? How many of you bought team pictures and all that in the past? Okay. What did you do with your team pictures? They're in a drawer somewhere. They may be on the refrigerator, things like that. By next year, you will be able to buy team pictures so that when you look at it with your phone, your son, grandson, or granddaughter will be able to stand up and tell you what they did. Or stand up and tell you, let me show you my swing, or let me show you how to throw a curveball or a fastball. That's coming. It's going to change very quickly. We're doing it for a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, and a lot of academic places right now. A couple other things I just wanted to cover with you is that it's not just the education that is growing. It's growing very fast in companies. We just recently got a contract where Mercedes, we build Mercedes' engines in virtual reality, and their new factory workers practice on putting them together in virtual reality before they go into the factory and work on them. We do work for Lockheed Aircraft. We do a lot of work for Gulfstream Aviation. And we're actually getting ready to do some work now for the National Flight Academy, which is here in Pensacola, that works with the Air Force here. Because when they go out to a school to talk to them about what's going on, if you go talk to them about a museum, it's pretty boring. But if you go out there and turn on a machine and we can put airplanes in the air in the museum, in the classroom that can fly over your head, it gets pretty exciting pretty quickly. So we're doing that for the National Flight Academy here. So more and more and more, this kind of technology is going to change things in schools and change things in businesses. I don't know how many of you heard the announcement yesterday. Ford is going to quit making cars. Ford is going to, they're going to keep making the Mustang, and they're going to make one crossover vehicle, but everything else they're going to make is either an SUV or a pickup truck. They're getting rid of the Taurus and all those things starting next year. Ford came to us 2 years ago with a plan to do that, and they gave us their pickup truck to build in virtual reality before they sent it to the factory to see if they could build it. We were able to build it, project it into a room. You can walk around it, you can open the doors, you can do everything you want to it to see how it works, but when I push a button, it disappears and goes away. And then from that, they were able to make some engineering changes, send it to their factory, and greatly reduce the cost of what they do. A lot of work that we've done with Georgia Tech, we've done the same thing in the robotics industry with them and several other places doing those kind of things. So virtual reality and augmented reality are programs you're going to start hearing more and more about. But what I'm here to tell you about really today is this last little bit. You know, there's a lot of changes that have gone on in everybody's lives. All of us, you change as you get older, you change as things happen, but there's a few things that change in your life that are so significant that I consider them to be inflection points. You know, when the Berlin Wall came down, that was an inflection point in history. When the laptop computer came out, the personal computer, that was an inflection point in history. Virtual reality being made was a change. It's just a program that made that's going on. But virtual reality's kind of hit a stopping block right now. They don't know what to do with it, so we're trying to figure out what to do with it. And over the last 30 days to 60 days, we've reached a real breakthrough that I think in the next 2 years is going to make a change. Remember the picture I put up there of me doing that? Okay. What we've done now is we figured out that we can scan those people. So we've hired historical actors. We filmed Benjamin Franklin. We filmed George Washington. We're in the process of filming more and more and more. So in a history classroom in the near future, the teacher is going to be able to push a button, put Benjamin Franklin on the floor there, and he will talk to the students about what he was doing while the Declaration of Independence was being written. Now, he was eating his way across Europe, is what he was doing. That's what he was doing. He wasn't there. He was out eating, trying to build support for the colonies. But to hear him tell that story is one thing. But here's the inflection point that's getting ready to change. So far, everything we've done is we create an image that stands there and it puts out a message. But in the past 90 days, we figured out a way to take Siri or another program like you were talking about, somebody was talking about earlier about having a Siri phone and the person talking back to you. We can now put a voice recognition chip into our program that has the person and give it keywords so that when I put a virtual George Washington right there and he talks to you about Valley Forge, you can ask him questions and he will answer you. We're going to have that in classrooms starting next fall. So I want you to know the world is changing. A lot of it is changing because Rotary helps teachers accept change. A lot of times when I go to schools, one of the biggest problems I have is teachers say, we're afraid of the new technology, we don't know what to do with it. But through the business relations and the relations they've got in the community, and then by just talking to people at Rotary and other places, they come back and say, okay, I think I can do this. Work with me, and we work with them to help them get over that little bit of fear and move on down the road. So the message I'll leave you with today is that life is changing. It's going to change tremendously in the next 2 years. There's going to be an inflection point that's going to hit like a tsunami wave in education. And believe it or not, you may not see it every day in what you do, but Rotarians are leading the way. And I very much appreciate what you do. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So the biggest takeaway on all that is I don't ever want to hear any of you ever say again, we can't get a quality speaker at our meeting. You can have Benjamin Franklin there. You could have Paul Harris there. You're going to work on... Actually, I had an opportunity to talk with all three of our panelists prior to coming here to Sandestin by telephone. It was a good thing I did because I realized I was out of my depth and didn't want to sit up here with my mouth agape. And when I was talking to Stewart, the way he communicated, he must have realized it very early that I was out of my depth. He said, do you remember Star Wars and R2-D2? And Obi-Wan tapped R2-D2 and suddenly Leia popped up and was talking. And that's exactly what we just looked at. But that was a movie, this is reality. Our third panelist today is Aimee Copeland. Aimee is a psychotherapist. And I'm sure that after the brief discussions she's had with me, she's probably dying to have a little session with me. Aimee and the Aimee Copeland Foundation have a goal of creating accessible opportunities for individuals of all ages and abilities to enjoy outdoor recreation and other holistic therapeutic options. And by the way, it's Aimee that swims those 3 miles a week. Aimee, welcome. Please join me in welcoming Aimee.
Thank you, Rotarians. It's an honor to be with you today. In 2012, I was a graduate student at the University of West Georgia, studying a unique field called eco-psychology. I was also working 3 jobs, one of them as a waitress at a local breakfast restaurant. And I had just taken my last final exam of the semester and had just gotten off my morning shift when one of my friends invited me to come hang out at the river that ran behind her house. It was a beautiful spring day and I couldn't say no. And as we're out there wading down the river, we stumbled upon an old homemade zip line. I don't know about y'all, but I was raised in the South, and when we see a rope swing or some boards going up a tree, we don't ask questions, we just jump off it. And that's what we did. It was actually my second turn on the zip line that I heard some of the most horrific noises I've ever heard before in my life. The first sound was the crack of the zip line snapping, and the second sound was the thud of my body landing on the very sharp rocks that I had just noticed lay below the zip line. My leg was cut very badly, big ol' cut, curved cut, created this like flap effect, saw parts of my anatomy I never really wanted to see, and the river was turning red around my leg. My friends called 911 and the ambulance drove right down into the river to pull me out. It took 22 surgical staples to close that wound. And while we knew it was bad, what we didn't know was that it was harboring a stowaway. I had flesh-eating bacteria, and over the course of the next 3 days, my left leg completely rotted, almost overnight. On the 3rd day when I woke up, I had lost control of my entire body. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The only words I managed to babble were, "I think I'm dying." And after being taken to the ER, the doctors verified that I was correct. I was dying. And I was immediately life-flighted to Doctors Hospital in Augusta, where they contacted my parents and got their consent to remove my left leg to the hip, along with a large amount of flesh from my torso. I was immediately put on full life support, And the doctors told my parents she's probably not going to make it through the night. My parents, of course, were devastated and asked the doctors what they could do. And they were surprised by the answer they heard when the doctor said, well, you can pray, and you can urge everybody around you to do the same. My parents joined hands in prayer in that very moment. My psychology department held an all-night prayer vigil in my honor, and the doctors sat by my bedside, twisting and turning the dials that kept me alive. And the next day, they said, you're not going to believe this. Last night, her lactic acid levels rose to 10 times the normal level. That's 3 times the survivable level. And the words they used to describe my recovery were astonishing, mind-boggling, incredible, and unbelievable. So I don't know about y'all, but I think the prayers worked. Thank you. I spent 2 months in the ICU before being transferred to Shepherd Center. At this point, my hands and my right foot had to be removed as well due to some of the medications, vasopressors, which kept me alive. A lot of people don't understand why I went to Shepherd Center. It's a spinal cord injury hospital and a fantastic one, but I don't have a spinal cord injury. In retrospect, I'm glad that's where I went, because think about it. If I had been at an amputee hospital, surrounded by people missing one limb, below the knee perhaps, I would have been feeling really sorry for myself. But here I was at Shepherd Center, and neither of my next-door neighbors could move anything but their faces. That put things into perspective real fast, especially when one of them asked the physical therapist, could he have his limbs amputated so he could use prostheses like I do? This taught me a valuable lesson. Even me, with all I had lost, there was somebody else who would trade places with me. I had it better than a lot of people. And this made me start to be really reflective about all that I have, all that I take for granted, and to realize that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, there's further down. How often do we get caught up with the pettiness of our own issues? You know, the traffic, the lines, we get impatient, we get frustrated, and we forget how much suffering there is in the world. You can see my struggles really clearly on my outsides, but I guarantee you every person in this room has been through something. And it is our pain and our suffering that makes us human. And it's our pain that connects us. And so I learned that to really heal myself, I needed compassion. And that's what drew me to start helping other people. And I know you Rotarians know what I'm talking about when I say, when I help others, I'm the one who heals the most. And even though we all have our issues and we all have our struggles, together we can make a difference. When I left the Shepherd Center, I was really surprised because, you know, at Shepherd I had a nice call button on my bed. I could press it and my ladies in waiting, nurses, would come to my every beck and call. When I went home, there was no call button and there were no ladies in waiting. And if I wanted something, I had to figure it out. And it didn't take long for me to realize I had to really want it if I was going to figure it out. So if you'd asked me to do the laundry, no, I can't do that. Can't possibly do that. But if my cell phone died and I wanted to get on social media, I'd have my leg against one wall, my forehead against another, charger in mouth. I'd spend 2 hours to get that cell phone plugged in. It didn't take long for me to realize whether I really wanted something or not. Because if I gave up, that meant I didn't want it. And so when I got out of Shepherd Center, one thing I really wanted, having long hair and it being August in Georgia, was to put my hair in a ponytail. And I went to the occupational therapist and asked, how do I do this ponytail thing? And he just shook his head sadly at me and said, well, all the female above extremity amputees I know just cut their hair short. At that time, that was not an answer for me. Granted, this OT was a man and bald. Maybe not the ponytail expert I'd been looking for. Well, I bought a bunch of contraptions off the internet and I failed time and time and time again. But on that 101st try, I got my hair in a ponytail. If I'd given up on try 47, even try 73, I never would have gotten that. And again, I think this is true for every person in this room. No matter what your goal is, you can achieve it if you're willing to fail 100 times. And if you're not, you didn't really want it. So it doesn't matter what we have. It doesn't matter what happens to us. What matters is what we do with that, how we respond to that. That is what our human ingenuity allows us to do, to creatively solve problems. And so some people come to me and they're like, that's great, Aimee, that's great that you have this wisdom that lets you, so respond to your challenges. But what about me? My life is really hard. What do I do with that? And for me, that's where faith comes in. For me, that's where you have to believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that all of this is happening for a reason. So often in life we go along and we're like, this is good and this is bad. We group life into those two categories. And we want all the good stuff, but keep the bad stuff away. And what I've learned is that we don't grow and we don't change if we repress our obstacles. And how would we ever know if we had faith if it was never challenged, if it was never tested? And so our obstacles become opportunities when we see them as opportunities to evolve, change, and grow. And my dad always says, in hard times you can have fear or you can have faith. And I can't stand up here and pretend that I was perfect all along the way. And I'm also a psychotherapist, so I think there's room for all emotions. There's room for sadness, there's room for pain, there's room for anger. But eventually you gotta even let go of those to make room for happiness and joy. And so I've had a lot of times where my faith was tested. I've had a lot of opportunities to strengthen it and to grow. One of these opportunities came about 1.5 years ago. It was a Sunday morning after church. And after church, I love to cook a big Sunday lunch. And I was raised by a long lineage of Southern cooks. And on this particular day, I was making chicken pot pie. And we don't use cream of mushroom or any of that in our chicken pot pie. No, we make our gravy from scratch. If you know anything about making gravy, you start with your fat and your flour, and you mix this into a roux. And it takes a while. You gotta stir, and if you stop stirring, it could lump, it could clump, it could burn. All sorts of terrible things could happen to your gravy. This is where I was when one of my best friends walked through my door and said, Aimee, where is your van? And of course, he was talking about my fully outfitted, wheelchair-accessible van that had been donated to me by Steve Raymond on the Katie Couric show about 1 year before. I live in kind of a rough area of Atlanta, and I knew immediately that my van had been stolen. But here I was, making this chicken pot pie. And if I stopped stirring, it would burn, it would lump, it would clump. All sorts of horrible things could happen. So I motioned to him to grab my cell phone and to call my parents. All right, let's call the insurance company. All right, let's call the police. And at this point, my boyfriend is there, and they're both kind of cowering on the side of the kitchen like, is she okay? Is she gonna snap at any moment? And I'm like, guys, the van has already been stolen. Ruining this chicken pot pie ain't gonna bring it back. And it's like, how many times do we do that in life? One bad thing happens and we let it ruin our whole day, our whole week, our whole year. I've seen people let one bad thing ruin their entire lives. I was not gonna let this chicken pot pie go down the drain. No. What I was worried about was the next day, I had to report to work at 7:30 in the morning at Shepherd Center, where I was now working in case management. Well, it's 5 miles away from my house, and you can't fit one of these things in a normal car. I didn't know how I was gonna get there. So I shifted into problem-solving mode just as soon as that chicken pot pie came out of the oven. It was delicious, by the way. And I looked up the MARTA bus routes. It was gonna take 2 buses and a train to get to Shepherd Center the next day. If y'all know anything about MARTA, that could take weeks. But then I looked at Google Maps, and I saw that Shepherd Center is exactly 5 miles from my house. Looked down at my wheelchair speedometer and saw I can go exactly 5 miles per hour. I reasoned if I rolled the entire way, I should get there in 1 hour. So that's what I did. I set out down Boulevard to North Avenue to Peachtree Road, and there were people out for their morning jog, and there were some people who looked like they hadn't been to sleep the night before. Hello, neighbors. And I was 15 minutes early to my meeting that morning. My vehicle was recovered in 12 hours. I know things don't always work out this perfectly, but this exemplifies to me faith in action. When we have faith, when we believe, when we stop grouping things into good and bad, we can see things as they just are. And when we see things as they are without being colored by our own expectations and desires, we can take action. We can make changes. We don't have to be paralyzed by our own emotions. We can experience them, let them go, and move forward. And that's what this has allowed me to do. To realize that, to live my life differently, not as the judger, but as a tool of the Lord, allowing His will to unfold. And that is my message to you all today. We have human ingenuity. We have grit. We have determination. These are human characteristics that are within all of us if we only express them and have faith. And this has allowed me to move forward and use what has happened to me to help others. So I went on and got a second master's degree in social work. I now have dual masters in psychology and social work. I'm a psychotherapist in Atlanta, and I've also started the Aimee Copeland Foundation to help people in wheelchairs. Thank you so much. Thanks, it's been an incredible journey. Helping people in wheelchairs get mental health opportunities and outdoor recreation services. And so this experience, I've always been a helper. I never knew who to help. And God just gave me a giant flashing neon sign that says, people with disabilities. And so here I am, letting Him use me, being His tool. And everything that happens to us helps determine what kind of tool we can be for Him if we don't get bogged down, if we don't let it ruin our lives. So thank you guys so much for having me today. I hope you'll stay part of the conversation. Check me out on social media. I'm on all the things, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I just started a YouTube channel. You can go click on there and you can see me swimming. You can see me making chicken pot pie. And so whatever your excuses are, whatever bad things happen to hold you back, you can see that we don't have to group things into good or bad. We can see everything as it just is and use that to help others. I know you know how to do that, Rotarians. I know you of all people, service above self. That's what we're here for. Not just here in Rotary, but that's what we're on this planet for, to leave it a better place than it was when we found it. Thank you. Thank you.